All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 7 of the LineTime Sports UFC talk. This is LineTime Rick at LineTime Rick on Twitter with my good friend, The Hammer at LineTime Hammer on Twitter. And don't forget to follow LineTime Sports at LineTime Sports on Twitter. This week, we have no UFC, unfortunately, but we're going to have to talk about a couple of things. We're going to have the UFC 294 recap from this past weekend. We have the Jon Jones announcement, him being out of UFC 295, unfortunately. We're going to go through Ngannou versus Tyson Fury, which is this week, and we're going to go to the Paramount announced that Showtime Sports is going to be gone by the end of 2023. So we're going to talk about all those things, starting off with UFC 294 recap. We're just going to kind of get right into it and talk about that main event. Talk about first of all, my pick of the week, Islam and Volk to go the distance. That very obviously did not happen. It could have been further from happening. It was a round one knockout head kick. I mean, and if you guys listened to our episode last week, you could tell that I was very much personally rooting for Alexander Volkanovski to get it done. But and it's not so much how much I dislike Islam, but I mean, now at this point, you just gotta respect the guy. I mean, we haven't seen Alexander Volkanovski get finished since what, 2015. I mean, every fight that we watched of his, it feels like he was not only in it, but he would win. I mean, his only loss in the UFC was against Islam. His last fight via
Mhm.
decision, and I mean, I expected that fight to go so much differently. I expected it to be a competitive fight, 5 rounds, and Islam and his team, they must have seen something where he was susceptible to that head kick. They threw it a couple of times in the first round, and it got right over Volk's guard. And I mean, the ground and pound that continued after the head kick was brutal. I mean, Islam couldn't have looked better.
Yeah, I mean, the fight started out pretty solid for Volk. He stuffed a couple takedowns, looked good in doing that. Was able to even like clinch him up against the cage, and it looked like a decent start. It was like Islam did throw that head kick a couple times, and it, I think one or two might have like been glancing blows, but Volk looked like he was doing a decent job of blocking it when he was throwing it. So yeah, I mean, I expected Islam to win, even though I was rooting heavily for Volk. But I mean, no one could have expected him to get knocked out. I mean, he's never been finished in the UFC. Um, he has only had one loss, and it was outside the UFC before that. And I don't think he got finished in that fight. He might have, but I mean, how many years ago is that? So yeah, hats off to Islam. He's a great fighter, even if you don't like him, you think he's pretty unlikable like myself. Like he is it's kind of hard to not deny him as the pound for pound best fighter on the roster right now. Like I understand having Jones there still with what he's done, and he's really never had a loss. His only loss is a DQ loss to Matt Hamill, but yeah, I mean it's hard to deny him. It's I will say that I'm still very excited for the if they're gonna do him and Justin Gaethje next rather than Oliveira, because I've talked about this before. I mean, I just think Oliveira, it's just a terrible stylistic matchup. Even being how great of a fighter Oliveira is, I just really think that's a terrible stylistic matchup. And Gaethje's just looked so good in his recent fights, so I'd be excited to see if they put that together. Especially because like it sucks that Oliveira might lose the shot over getting injured and getting cut a week out, but like that's kind of how the UFC works. Like if not even just like pulling out, but like they kind of just go with like what makes sense at the time, you know. And I kind of see that being Justin Gaethje next. What I would wanted your thoughts on that. Do you think they will run it back with Oliveira? Or do you think they give it to Gaethje now that Oliveira pulled out?
Um, it's a tough question, and I think that we're gonna actually get into that a little bit more in detail later
Okay.
when our friend Adam and Oscar gets into this. But just looking at it from the outside looking in, I think that it's probably going to be Oliveira. I think that Dana likes to right his wrongs whenever there's a true injury, and he knows it. I don't
Yeah.
know as a fan which one I would prefer because I do love Charles Oliveira. I love
No, yeah.
Justin Gaethje as well, but I don't know. I think that after seeing what I saw on this past Saturday, I don't really like the matchup for either of them. I mean,
Yeah, I completely get that. It's kind of just seems like it's a winnable matchup for either fighter. But yeah, it just I don't know. Gaethje showed me some stuff in his last couple of fights that you really haven't seen before. Like he's being a lot more patient, a lot more calculated, and his power is just insane. So, but so is Oliveira. So, I mean, either way, it's gonna be a fun fight for the fans.
Yeah, and something I was gonna
It's
say is, like,
literally
it's
good at
really
that.
easy to draw the comparison with Islam and Habib, same camp, they're related, that it's you can very easily see the similarities between the 2. I think that Islam is pretty obviously a better striker, whereas Habib is the better grappler, and Habib has come out and said that maybe his toughest fight was against Justin Gaethje, or at least it's the hardest he had ever been hit.
Yeah,
So, I think that, I don't think Islam's ever been, close to being hit like Justin Gaethje hits, and we've seen Islam get knocked out in the UFC.
exactly. Yeah,
But,
that's
like I said, and the thing with Justin Gaethje too is he doesn't like to wrestle, although he's a good wrestler.
yeah,
I think that if he finally commits, but we've been saying this fight after fight for Justin Gaethje, if he implements his wrestling, if he doesn't like to do it. He likes to get into clinch and he likes to hit you with those hard punches in the clinch. Cool. But for Islam's style, I feel like he's to have some defensive wrestling. He's gonna have to transition that into his striking. But like I said, I think that I probably see Oliveira being Islam's next matchup. See that fight happening again. I don't really see Charles beating Islam. He made it look super easy in that first fight. Charles got knocked down, and then once he was on the ground, Charles loves to do that, invite you into his guard thing, and Islam had no problem entering that guard and finishing the fight. Like, it was just it didn't look good. I think that that's how a second fight fares. That's why I would like to see Gaethje get
yeah.
the opportunity, but like I said, I'm not sure how Dana sees that. I do think that Dana makes rights his wrongs with Charles and lets Charles get that fight.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say with that, you're talking about Gaethje not liking to use his wrestling. He's talked about this multiple times, and it's like so weird because he literally just said he doesn't like doing it because he gets so tired wrestling, and then, like, it's, like, kinda weird to hear that from a D1 All-American, but, like, he said even in college, he's like, "I would walk off the wrestling mat every time and feel like I am dying." Like, because he would be so tired, and it's like it makes sense to a point because it's like he does go out all out in everything he does. Like, he doesn't really take a backseat, like, he's gonna go all out in it, so but it is weird to, like, think, like, he avoids wrestling because he, like, knows he will get tired, and if you get tired against someone like Islam, you're fucked, so I think that's the only reason, like, he might not even try to wrestle with him, and just Islam being such a good grappler and to begin with, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think another possibility for Islam, I mean, he said post fight, Sean, Dana, pick somebody for me to fight, I'll fight him, which you got to respect that. But I think that if Islam had his choice, I think that we would see him go up to 170 and fight the winner of Leon and Colby.
Yeah,
Um,
that
I
would be
think that he's
great.
accepted the challenge for Volk becoming double champ twice now. And
Yeah.
for what? He doesn't get the opportunity to become double champ. And I think that 170 would best suit him. I mean, we've seen I think it was Habib come out and say that when Islam fights, he's in there close to 190. So I mean, he can easily make it up to 170. I mean, I think that he would prefer to be fighting at 170. It's just I would like to see that matchup between him and Colby. It would be a good showcase of Russian versus American wrestling.
And
Uh,
just 2 insane gas tanks, like 2
yeah, insane gas tanks.
cardio machines, so yeah, that's a very exciting fight to make. I would like to see Islam get one more title defense before he does that, but I can completely understand them giving him the shot now, and, like, if you think back to Connor, like, Connor had 0 title defenses and got the shot at 155 when he was at 45, so whatever makes sense money-wise is what I feel like the UFC is gonna do.
I agree, and it's kind of up to Islam if he wants to cement himself up there with the best 55ers. I think that that's already gonna be Habib. I mean, maybe it's up for the debate. I don't really think so. I think Habib is probably the best 55er. It would take Islam a couple more fights at 55, title fights, to dethrone Habib, and I don't know how much longer Islam plans on fighting. I think he might have a career path similar to Habib where it's like, what else do I really have to prove? I'm dominating all these guys. So maybe, 1, 2 more fights at 55. I think somewhere in there he will go up to 70 depending on who holds the belt at that point in time.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of interesting fights with Islam, I will say that. I think the Volk stuff, that's gone. I don't think he needs to do that again. Um, Charles, fun fight. Justin, fun fight. I maybe Connor. I very highly doubt that.
Yeah, just because of the bad blood between those 2 camps, I could see it at some point, but, like, Conor has to come back and win first, like,
Exactly.
he can't fight as long like, if he loses to Michael Chandler, like,
Just
there's
timeline wise, I don't think that one adds up. So, maybe he goes up to 70 sooner than we think, but we'll see. And
for
then
sure.
we'll just kind of go into the co-main of 294. Hamzat versus Kamaru. That was an interesting fight. We saw Hamzat do what he does, and he came out of a cannon to start that fight. Like, he had all the energy in the world. He shot quick. He kind of used up all of his energy in his gas tank in that first round. We saw him really, really slow down in rounds 2 and 3. It's said that Hamzat had broke his right hand in that first round, which is why he had a decrease in output. But like that doesn't really answer for a decrease in stamina. I think Kamaru looked better on the feet. Even on the short notice, I think Kamaru was outstriking him. He had a heavy jab. He looked pretty good up there at 185. Obviously, Hamzat got the win. Two judges gave that first round a 10-8. I know that you and I were talking about it when we were watching it. I think that
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think it was
that was a great
reasonable.
call. Oh, yeah, that was a great call on your part, like, you were fairly confident that that could be a 10-8 round, it's just kinda hard, man, because it's so black and white it's just so gray with, like, knowing, like, what is a 10-8 round, you know what I mean? Like, it's not black and white, and it's tough because, like, it's supposed the way it's supposed to be is you should be close to finishing the fight, but at the same time, he had, what, 4 minutes and 20 seconds of control time. Kamara, I don't really know how many shots Kamara landed,
I think
like
he had like 3 in the first round.
yeah, so it was very dominant, and yeah, that was a great call, thinking that was a 10-8 because yeah, 2 judges agreed with it, or no, all 3 wasn't it all 3 actually? Because did it? Because well, yeah, because I'm pretty sure the last judge had it as a draw, giving Usman the last 2 rounds and then a
Maybe
10.
that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that
I
could have
mean,
been.
all 3 judges agreed with you, so, I mean and, like, what you were saying with, the broken hand and stuff, it did look like he depleted his gas tank in that first round, like, he looked like he was breathing heavy and that he was going for the finish in the first round for sure, but the handbrake makes a lot of sense because if you think about it, he really he broke his right hand, right? Okay, so that makes so much more sense because he really wasn't throwing that right hand at all in the second, third round. He was strictly jabbing, and like, yeah, that could be because your stamina is messed up, but or your stamina is decreased and all that. But at the same time, it makes so much more sense that he wasn't throwing that right hand at all, and Usman started clipping him.
Yeah, all 3 judges had the first round as a 10-8, but then, one of them gave both the second and the third round to Usman.
Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so that so
I think that's
definitely.
an interesting scorecard. I don't think that I could have given Usman that third round.
Yeah, it was honestly very close. Like, the second round was Usman's for sure. The
Yeah.
third round was very close. I could have seen it going either way, but
Well,
so
they actually 2 of the judges gave Usman the 3rd round. Yeah, no, 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 2 of them gave Usman the 3rd round, and then 2 other judges or 1 of the same, and then 1 other gave,
okay,
the
that
2nd
makes
round, so
sense with
just
them.
really weird, just, like, all over the place scoring,
Yeah, some
basically.
weird judging. We had some obviously we had some weird judging and some weird doctor work in that card, which we'll talk
And
about when we get
just
into the fights.
refereeing in general, man.
Yeah,
Like,
it was weird.
the refs did not wanna take points. It was, like and we'll talk about it more when we get into the card, but it was yeah, it was just a weird card in general. It was still exciting, it was still a solid card, but some real weird shit was happening in Abu Dhabi, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just kind of end thoughts on Chimaev and Usman. Hamzat, he looked like how Hamzat looks. He looked dominant in the first. He was competitive all throughout. He really wanted to get that first round finish. And like you were saying about the 10-8s nowadays, it is so hard to determine on what is a 10-8. I
Yeah,
agree that at least back in the day, a 10-8 was man, he was this close to finishing that fight. If he would have sunk in that submission a little bit more, it would have been over, saved by the bell or
or, like,
they
multiple
just recovered.
knockdowns. Yeah,
Exactly.
multiple
So
knockdowns, like,
it was definitely a completely dominant round. I thought like you were saying, I did think that the judges would probably see it for a 10-8 just because of how dominant it was for Khamzat. But
For
it's definitely a gray area, and I wish it was something that they would kind of set in stone and put in the rule books like, hey, to get a 10-8, this, this, and that would pretty much
Yeah.
need to happen. But
For sure. So,
I
like,
don't
what
know if
I'm
we'll see
saying with
that.
that too is, like, it seemed like more back in the day, it was like you have to be very close to finishing the fight to get a 10-8, but now we're seeing a lot more, like, completely dominant rounds like that, where you're really not close to finishing the fight become 10-8. So, I think that's maybe just the direction they're moving in general, which I'm fine with. It's just I wish the fighters knew a little bit more, but can't leave it to the judges in general, so
Yep. Okay. And then getting into what we were talking about, how this card was a little weird. We really saw it in the Uncle Ive versus Johnny Walker. It was not great. It was I think it was an illegal knee, or they I
it
don't even think they
it
called it an illegal knee. I
It
think
was an illegal knee, but they for some reason
yeah,
didn't call it an illegal knee. Like, I've never really seen that blatant of a illegal knee or illegal shot in general happen, and the fighter not get DQ'd when the other fighter can't continue. But, yeah, like, that was just such a weird sequence because Johnny Walker obviously was taking a little time, like, he obviously was hurt by the knee, but it looked like it was mostly a misunderstanding with the, doctor and, Johnny Walker, like, so Dana came out and said it afterwards, I guess the doctor asked him where he's at, and he said the desert, which, like and Dana was like, "He's not technically wrong," like, and, like, Johnny Walker doesn't have great English, like, so it seemed very weird. And then like Johnny Walker literally like tried to fight the referee essentially after they called it a DQ. Or not a DQ, after they stopped the fight and called it a no contest. But like I don't know, man. Like I think he could have continued, but like that wasn't really on him. Like I think the doctor did a really poor job of trying to make that fight go on after the fact. And also, like, Johnny Walker should have got the win. Like, he could like the doctor stopped the fight and it was a blatant illegal knee. And then like Magomedov was like mad about it. Like he was like mad, like super mad. It's like, dude, you're pretty lucky that they didn't call that illegal knee and you get DQ'd. So that was just a really weird sequence. And yeah, I was really confused by the fact that it wasn't called an illegal knee. I don't know.
yeah, and it wasn't the doctor's first like mishap on that card. And it was super unfortunate. Like you said, Johnny Walker said we're in the desert. He did an interview afterwards, and he was like, well, "I was gonna say Abu Dhabi, but I thought I should be more specific, and I said the desert." And like you said, it was like a language
Which
barrier
is
thing.
less specific, which is less specific, but I
Yeah,
mean,
and we
either
know
way.
Johnny Walker. He's a weird guy, and you know that like as weird as that sounds, I believe him full-heartedly that
Yeah,
that
for
was what
sure.
he was thinking. I mean,
Yeah,
especially after he got kneed straight to the face in an illegal manner. I mean, that's just no fun for anybody. It's going to take some time to recover, and you have 5 minutes to recover. And that was one of the weird things is they called it at about what a minute and a half, 2 minutes
yeah,
into that
yeah. Like
timeout.
they
It's
could
like
even
give him the full 5 minutes. Let's
yeah,
see if he can recover and keep fighting.
that
But that
makes no
doctor, he
sense.
was almost eager to stop the fight, and
Yeah, and you really never get a question like that asking a fighter if they can continue. It's usually, can you continue the fight? Like, are you like, and they would ask you something more black and white, like, then where are you? Like, it was just a super weird question for the doctor to ask. And like Johnny Walker's answer wasn't like bad enough, like that you should have called the fight, in my opinion. Like, he didn't say like he was like didn't know where he was at.
yeah, and I forget which fight it was recently. I'm drawing a blank on which fight exactly it was, but you saw the doctor hold up. How many fingers am I holding up? And they were like 7, and they're like, ah, whatever, go in there, keep fighting. And, that's usually how we see it because, they wanna keep fighting. The
Yeah, for sure.
Dana wants them to keep fighting. Everybody wants them to keep fighting, especially on a card of this magnitude. I get it. Fighter safety is a good thing, but like you were saying, they tried to
100%.
fight each other immediately after the fight got called. It looked like they were both game to keep going. I mean, obviously, Magomed was very game to keep going because he thought he probably was gonna get DQ'd, which he didn't. But this is also becoming a reoccurring theme with Uncle Live is his fights. They get stopped and finish in the weirdest ways. It was with Blachowicz. It was we saw the draw, and he said,
Draw.
I don't know if you'll ever see me again in the UFC. And then
Yeah.
before that, with Iwan Cutabella, we saw him Cutabella baiting Magomed into trying to finish him, and the referee called it. It's just all these fights with Magomed. I said earlier in the podcast last week that he very well could be the most skilled light heavyweight, and it's a shame that we can't see him defend it. Like every time that this guy fights, there's always something, and
Yeah, it's really
honestly, he's becoming pretty unlikable in my eyes. I mean, the way that he reacted after throwing that illegal knee, getting mad at the fact that they were going to stop the fight. It's like, well, don't throw an illegal knee.
yeah.
You could have avoided it altogether. But anyways, I think that they both did a good job on setting up a rematch of this fight. It's probably where that goes. I mean, they're going to fight again. We'll see how it ends. It was kind of hard to get a read on who would win that fight. I mean, we didn't get to see much of anything. They were just starting to feel each other out.
It ended so quickly, but yeah, I think the UFC has to make that a rematch after how that fight ended, and obviously now there's bad blood like between them, like with how Magomedov reacted, and then even Johnny Walker, like he went on Ariel Hawani, and Hawani asked him if he has anything to say to Magomedov, and he just gave him the double bird, and just that's all he said. So I mean, there's definitely bad blood, and I would be very excited to see that rematch.
Yeah, all right. And then going into the next fight, it was Alaskarov versus Warley Alves. Ikram Alaskarov, he got that quick knockout. He hit him with a jab at first, just a left jab, shook him. And then he hit him with a nice flying knee, and then just this flurry of punches. I mean, Ikram is the real deal. I think we all know that. Seeing what they do next with him is going to be interesting. I think the Khamzat rematch is going to happen at some point down the line. Obviously, we heard before the fight, after the fight, that Khamzat is going to go and fight Sean Strickland. But I think that down the line somewhere, I think that they remake that fight. Yeah, I mean, Ikram looks like the real deal. That's his only professional loss was against Khamzat outside of the UFC. He's running through the guys they put in front of him, and he looks real good doing it.
Yeah, I mean, his power is insane. Like, I truly thought that Alves was going to have a little bit more success early on, especially because Ikram, so this is Ikram's second fight in the UFC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and his first fight was against Phil Hawes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And like Phil Hawes had success in that fight early on. Like, obviously, Ikram ended up knocking him out, but like, yeah, I just thought Alves, being such a veteran, he would show a little bit more, but yeah, Ikram is definitely the real deal. He has some insane knockout power.
Yeah, we're gonna see some exciting fights with him down the line.
Yeah.
And then the last fight of the main card, another quick one. It was Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Gafurov, and I mean, Saeed, don't let him lock in a gilly, right? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
this guy gets to the gilly and it's over. And I mean, he didn't have the guillotine locked in for a very long time in this fight. I mean, we saw him get it locked in, and maybe 3-4 seconds later, we saw Gafurov start to tap, and he had it in for another second because the ref really didn't see he had a bad angle, and Saeed just dropped him, and he was out cool. So I
Yeah.
mean, this guy's guillotine is insane. We were saying on the podcast, we were saying how his striking was a little bit better than his wrestling, which is weird with what we see these guys from Dagestan and Russia. We usually see them grappling first, then striking. But I mean, like I said, if you fall into this guy and give him a guillotine, gonna end bad.
Yeah, I mean, he gets the guillotine by getting taken down most of the times. It's not like he takes you down and puts it in that way or like jump skilly or whatever. It's people that think their wrestling is good enough to go against him, and it can be, but you have to protect your neck when you go for a takedown against this guy. His squeeze has to be incredible because he, like you said, he didn't even look like he had that locked in for 10 seconds and he was out cold. So, yeah, I mean, he has a great guillotine. I wish we would have been able to see him a little bit more on the feet because I wanted to see if he made some improvements in that aspect of his game. But I mean, he finished the fight quickly. He did what he needed to do. So, yeah, it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, so we're probably gonna see him get a pretty decent fight next. He has some momentum going in. And then how about the Muhammad Makhachev versus Tim Elliott fight? That one was interesting. So two judges had Tim Elliott up 2018 going into the third.
Yeah,
Obviously,
that was
Muhammad Makhachev
crazy.
finished it in the third round, so they
That was
didn't concede.
crazy, actually. Like,
That's nuts.
Yeah, so they didn't need to go to the score toss. When you told me that, like, I was down at your house and when you told me that, I was, like, really shocked because, like, I was pretty confident he lost the first round, like, the odds were showing it that way, like, Elliott looked great in the first round, but I mean, I was also pretty confident he won the second round, like, he took him down, and had control time for most of the round, like, Elliott threw up some submission attempts, but he didn't really have anything that looked to be locked in, and he wasn't really landing strikes off of his back, so I definitely thought that was a little interesting, and, yeah, get on Makhachev for getting it done because he would have lost that fight if he didn't finish him.
Yeah, and I don't think that it was necessarily his corner saying like, "Hey, man, go out there. You got to get this finish. You're down 2 on the scorecards." I think it was more of just that's who Muhammad Makhachev is. He wants to
Yeah.
get a big photo finish. He wants to, leave a good impression on the fans and the judges
Mhm.
and Dana. It was a good fight, man. But I think we had said earlier in the podcast prior that watch out for Tim Elliott. We'd
Yeah.
compared it to Darren Elkins the week before. He's a dangerous guy, man. He's a guy that you should never count out of a fight. And obviously, I mean, 2 judges giving him 2018. He was very obviously in that fight. So it was an interesting fight. Makhayev's gonna go up another level. He's gonna get another tougher fight. But this kid, he's definitely the real deal. His submissions are crazy. His ground game is great. He's a promising young prospect.
Yeah, and his striking's not bad either. Like, obviously, that's the biggest thing he needs to improve if he wants to be a champion here soon, but his striking's not bad. Like, Tim Elliott is a good, awkward striker, so, like, it makes sense that he had a little bit of, that he had a little bit of trouble with Tim Elliott on the feet. Like, that's no slouch on the feet. So, yeah, I mean, Mikhail, and like you said, like, yeah, I don't think his corner thought he was down 2 rounds to 0. I think that, yeah, exactly what you said. I think that's who Mikhail is. He's looking for the finish in every round. And lucky for him, he got it because I mean, I would have gave him that second round for sure, but like that's why you can't leave it to the judges, and he made good on that.
Yeah, you're right. And going into the next one, Trevor Peek got his decision win over Muhammad Yahya. That was a bit of a weird fight. It was a good fight. Trevor Peek, I love Trevor Peek. Like we said, he's got an iron chin. He likes to walk you down. He throws some hammers, man, and he has some weird strikes. That standing hammer fist, it never gets old. He
Yeah,
looked
like
good.
it's like a backhand fist from his feet.
Yeah,
Like I've never seen anyone throw that other than him, and he's thrown it multiple times now. Yes, he's
yeah, he's definitely fun to watch. And we'll get into another weird doctor mishap on this one. It was Henry versus Bosharat. One of the worst nut shots we've seen, and the doctor wanted to argue that it didn't hit him in the nuts. I've never seen that in my entire life. A doctor go up, "I don't think it hit you." He went, "Oh, it was my dick and my balls." He made that very clear, and he was in pain. I mean, he was getting ultrasounds on his testicles at the doctor's the next day, and this doctor's in there, "No, man, I don't think it hit."
I just wanted to ask you a question. I don't know if you know this, but is that the same doctor that's because I don't know
Same
if
doctor.
okay, because I didn't know if they have multiple ringside doctors in that instance. I thought it was the same doctor, but yeah, man, that guy needs to fucking go back to doctor school because like you can't tell like it was a very obvious nut shot and you can't tell like it was so weird him telling him like no it didn't hit you in it hit you in the balls like
Never
and
seen anything like it.
when he said Victor Henry, like, was, like, shocked. He's like, "What do you mean? It was all dick and balls, bro." I think that was his exact quote, and, like yeah, and, like, to be fair, like, it didn't look like, it was a bad nut shot, don't get me wrong, but it looked like it kinda did hit the leg too, but, like, you saw it on the replay multiple times, like, it for sure hit him in the balls, and, like, he would not have reacted that way, like, Victor Henry's a very game opponent, his coach is Josh Barnett, he's one of the better heavyweights in UFC history, a UFC champion, and, yeah, he's a game fighter, like, and apparently Josh Barnett said on Twitter that they all already requested for a rematch in the fight because Bosharat was talking afterwards, saying like it should be a knockout win for me. Like it's just like I hate when guys do that. It makes you so unlikable to the fans. Like and like and then Victor Henry came out and even said like made a statement and was like people saying that he should have got DQ'd, like that's ridiculous. Like this is the fight game. It obviously wasn't an intentional illegal blow. It wasn't intentional. Like it just so happened that it was illegal. And like yeah, like that makes me like Victor Henry so much more. Like the way he handled it, and then the way Bosherad handled it just makes you dislike the guy. Like there's really no more to it than that, in my opinion.
I have something else that makes me like Victor Henry. I don't know if you guys read his exact he posted about afterward, Victor Henry did about it. I mean, I'm just gonna quote this exactly. A little update for you guys. Doctor said no permanent damage to my pills, but I'm gonna walk a little funny for a couple days. Swelling has gone down a significant amount after sleeping with ice on my smooth criminals, which isn't very easy to do. That's his exact quote about it.
I mean, at least he's a good sport about it. The whole
Yeah,
situation was nuts, no pun intended. I'd never really seen anything like it. Like I said, uh, it was just odd to see the doctor try to argue with the guy that got kicked in the nuts that he didn't get kicked in the nuts. I mean, we've seen people when they're down and out of a fight try to like get an escape when there's a doctor stoppage. But like you
yeah,
said,
for
Victor
sure.
Henry is game and like he was crying and screaming. I mean, you
Yeah,
could not fake that kind of pain. And
yeah,
you know,
100%. Like and then like what happened with Johnny Walker, man. And like I know I was like kind of joking when I said like he needs to go back to doctor school, but like seriously, like what the fuck was that all about? Like he had two mishaps where it just really seemed seemed very seemed very weird. So, but
yeah, I think we're gonna take a break here and get into the one last fight.
okay, sounds good.
It's recording. Okay. You're good to go.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So yeah, we'll just recap the last fight that we're going to talk about. Unfortunately, it was my pick of Abu Azaitar over Cedric Dumas at like plus 190. That fight was pretty bad, like in general on both fighters' parts, and to be honest, it's kind of what I expected. Taking Abu at plus 190, like I didn't think he was gonna go in there and just dominate him. But like I said, I don't think Cedric Dumas deserves to be a minus 240 against anyone in the UFC. And I think he proved that in that fight. Like it was a very close fight. A lot of people I saw on Twitter were like, "Oh, Abu definitely won that." I mean, I can't say that. Like I thought he might have edged it out, but I don't know. Anytime the like fights that close, and I have a certain fighter, I pretty much expect to lose if it gets the scorecards like that. And yeah, I mean, the first round he landed a big shot and got immediately taken down after he landed the big shot and spent the whole time on his back. He didn't try to get up. He didn't try to hip escape at all. He pretty much accepted the position and lost that round. So I was I kind of chalked it after that round because I was like, oh my god, I didn't realize how bad his wrestling was because Dumas's wrestling isn't good at all. So it was just yeah, so he lost that round, and then the second round, it was pretty clear he won that round. He outputted him by a wide margin, and then he also landed the bigger shots in the round. And then that third round, man, like it was so close. Like Abu landed a decent amount more output, but Dumas hurt him with a jab, kind of looked like he wobbled him and almost like knocked him down with it. And he landed the better shots. And at the end of the round, he landed the cleaner shots. And you can't really expect to win a decision when that happens to you. Like Dumas did a good job of leaving a good image in the judges' heads of how that fight should end because of landing the harder shots and just what he did at the end of the round. So I stand by the pick there, man. Like plus 190 on in a fight that close. Like that's what you kind of have to do with these UFC cards that aren't the best for betting, man. You kind of have to take these shots on guys like there really wasn't much else we really liked. And I mean, we both were kind of talking about Trevor Peake taking him at plus 170, but it's also hard to bet on a guy like that who just doesn't have great fight IQ and is literally willing to get knocked out at any point in the fight. So, yeah, I mean, it was not a good fight to be honest, as like a fan, and I don't think either of those guys should be in the UFC to be honest. But yeah, we'll see what they do. I mean, I don't think they're both going to get cut. Like, I don't know how many fights they still have on their contract, but I don't think I don't think the UFC is going to renew either of those guys' contracts when they end their deals. To be honest,
Yeah, and I think a good point you brought up is that everybody loves to call for a robbery. It definitely wasn't a
definitely
robbery.
not
It,
a
it,
robbery.
it could have gone either way. You got it pretty spot on. It was 1-1 going into that third round. And it's just, it's recency bias for the judges. It's Dumas landed the bigger shots. But, he probably got out-volumed in that 3rd round. I feel like throughout the fight, he was getting out-volumed. It's just
Yeah,
the bigger shots, they have an impact on the judges' minds, and we all know that, and, like you said, it wasn't a great fight for either of them. It wasn't a great performance for either. I personally had it for Abu Azaitar. I liked the value at +190, and I still like it. I mean,
yeah.
you
I
win some,
mean,
you lose some.
I remember we were talking about it, and I was like, oh, like when we were talking about it, like during the fight, Abu won that second round. And I was like, I wonder what the odds are right now. Like, and I checked, and yeah, he closed at like Abu closed at like a -140 going into that third round. But that brings me to my next point, man. Live betting is so crucial at points like that. Like if you're watching that fight and seeing like Abu kind of start gassing and don't think like he's going to come out and win that round, that third round, like you get Cedric Dumas, who was a -250 before the fight at plus money, man. So like live betting fights are so crucial like that because it can swing that quickly, and especially in a fight that close and getting a guy that was the -250 going into the fight, like gotta look for this stuff, those type of things.
Well, I was gonna say one of the other things with that too is like you said that Azatar was -140 or whatever, and you could if you had him before and you were kind of uneasy about it, if you
Yeah,
live bet, you can arbit and just get in on
yeah,
Dumas. So
yeah, you can always little hedge. Obviously, it's not always gonna like work out, but like yeah, you're guaranteed to make a little bit of money by hedging out that way. So it's like it's whatever you think. And like the last thing I will say, like Abu definitely had more output, but he wasn't doing a great job of landing clean shots. Dumas was landing the cleaner shots for sure, in my opinion. And like a lot of the shots Abu was throwing, they were winging and kind of hitting on the hands and the arms and stuff like that. So I mean, Dumas did a good job of having solid enough defense to win that fight, in my opinion. But very close fight. Could have went either way.
Yeah, and to the live betting, I forget what exactly fight it was. It was one of the girl fights, but you and I were thinking about getting in on it live. We had thought that one of the girls had definitely had the edge, and we thought that she had won round 3. We were pretty confident she was going to win, and she didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
they just didn't give her the fight, and I think she was at like plus 150, 170. We were thinking about getting in on her, and they just didn't give her the fight. So it's
Yeah.
also that's the other thing with live betting is, you could read it as well as possible. You could think that the fight went one way and it just doesn't go your way. So, eh,
100%, that just plays into the judges again. But like when you bet MMA, you have to realize the judging isn't the best in MMA. It really isn't. It's the same judges that judge boxing. So like they aren't they don't know the sport as well as a lot of people do, honestly. And it's crazy to say because they're judging these fights, but like most of the judges are, you know, boxing judges or whatever. So it's tough for sure. But like I said, man, you got to know what you're getting into when you bet MMA. And there's a lot of times there is robberies in MMA, and like you said, I kind of thought that girl fight was a more like obviously way more of a robbery than the Dumas uh the big thing. Like that wasn't a robbery. That's a close fight that can go either way, and you can't be mad at the judges at that point.
yep. So now that we've recapped UFC 294 from this past weekend, we have a little bit of heartbreaking news about UFC 295 that's slated for November 11th. Jon Jones is out with a torn pec. Heartbreaking news, and it sparks a lot of questions. Dana announced it last night. He announced that Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira will now be the main event for the vacant light heavyweight title, and we're gonna get Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich taking over that heavyweight fight for the interim heavyweight belt. I think that the main question that it brings to me is this the end of Jon Jones? There was a lot of speculation that Jones was going to retire after this fight, regardless. The torn pec is probably gonna keep him out somewhere around a year.
Yeah,
Do they
probably
keep Stipe on the shelf for a year to make
right
that
around
match with Jon Jones?
yeah,
I
right
mean,
around a
Stipe's already
year.
been out for a year and a half, right? That would be a
Yeah.
2.5, 3-year layoff for Stipe. There's a lot of questions.
They did announce that it's gonna be for the vacant heavyweight belt then? Okay,
It's
so
gonna be for an interim belt, not n they're n
okay,
Jones
so
isn't gonna
and
vacate, it's gonna be for
okay.
an interim.
So, yeah, that's a little weird. So, like, I kinda initially thought, like, they're kinda just saving the Stipe Jones fight, not giving no Stipe not getting the shot at the, interim belt, but, like, at the same time, if one of those guys is going to win that fight and become the interim champion, so, like, what? Do you make Jones and Stipe not for a belt, and then the winner fight and then, like, that's where it, like, kinda makes it a little iffy for me. That's like I agree with you where it's kind of tough. Like it might be Jones might not fight again because it's like I don't know, or like what is he gonna fight Stipe for a number one contender fight and then like what do you I just don't see Jones fighting one of those guys for the interim belt. Like he's talked about it multiple times how he doesn't want to fight these up and comers and like we were pretty confident that this was going to be his last fight, win or lose. So yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. What are your thoughts on, Pavlovich and, Tom Aspinall?
Uh, I think that I'm gonna be in the minority here. I like this fight more than Jon Jones Stipe. I think
Okay,
that it's a
yeah,
better fight.
I kinda agree. I
I do.
I wanted to hear your take, but yeah, I kinda agree because we haven't really talked about it at all, but, yeah, I kinda agree, like,
I think it's a better fight. I think it's
it's
more
very good.
competitive.
Yeah, I did too.
I it's 2 different fight styles too. I mean, Aspinall, he's kinda the well-rounded heavyweight where it's like he has the power, he has the striking, he can take you down, but with Pavlovich, I mean, I know that Francis Ngannou, who we're gonna talk about in a little, he was scary, he had the knockout power, but, like, Sergey Pavlovich, he has bricks for hands, dude.
Yeah, it's like, I don't even it's like, he is, like, so scary too, and, like, it just doesn't seem like people can take him down either. Like, that was the thing with Francis early on in his career, like, his wrestling was pretty bad, and then he improved that so much throughout his UFC career, and it just made him so scary. Pavlovich has just looked so good, like, he's fought Curtis Blades, who is other than Jon Jones, who's newly into the division, Curtis Blades is hands down the best wrestler in that division, and Curtis Blades wasn't even close to taking him down. So, Pavlovich is like that's a scary man, and, like, he's kinda been like that since he's been in the UFC, like, where he's had the solid takedown defense, so yeah, it's he's scary, but, like, Tom Aspinall, man, he moves obviously very good for a heavyweight, like, he has good submissions. Yeah, he has a little bit of power too. It's more volume power, I feel like, but at the same time, man, like, he gets knockouts as well, like, I think that's gonna be could be very competitive, like and he has a good chin, like, for sure. So, it's interesting. I don't know, like, if I have really a take on who I think is gonna win. I haven't really watched that much tape on it to, like, try to see where, I'm gonna go with it, but do you know if they released odds for that yet? I was just curious.
I haven't seen him yet, and something that else I was gonna say is, kinda going off of what you were saying earlier, I don't see Jon Jones ever fighting Aspinall or Pavlovich, which is why I don't see Stipe fighting either of them either. It's the new breed of
Yeah,
heavyweights versus I think that's why it was a perfect fight for Jon Jones to get Stipe. It's because, I mean, they're both
just
aging, they both fight similar, it's these new brand heavyweights just aren't good fights for Jon Jones. I hate to play devil's advocate because we're probably never gonna see it. I don't know if Jon Jones beats Tom Aspinall or Sergey Pavlovich.
yeah. No, I kinda agree, man, especially with, just his last couple performances, like, yes, he looked great against Uragan, he submitted him very quickly, but, like, just that light heavyweight, his last couple performances, man, like, they're well, he just didn't look like the John Jones of old, and, like, that's not taking anything away from John Jones. Father time comes for everyone, like, you if you're in the sport long enough, you're going to lose, so, I think that's kinda where he's at. I think he wants to go out undefeated. Yes, he has 1 loss on his record technically, but he is undefeated. He has never lost in the UFC, so I don't think he wants to take that risk, which I understand. Like that's kind of what Khabib did, where he wanted to go out on the sport on top. And you can't fault a guy for that. Like, a lot of fighters wanna keep going and they start getting knocked out and it starts to, like, kinda taint their legacy. Like, if you look at Anderson Silva, like, who I think is top 3 greatest fighters of all time, like, a lot of people don't agree anymore with how his UFC career ended, with getting knocked out how many times he did in the UFC and how many losses he took before his, career ended, so
Just to give you guys an update, there are odds out for Pavlovich and Aspinall. Best odds you can get on Aspinall -125. Best
oh,
for
wow.
Pavlovich is +112.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's razor thin margins,
Pretty
which is
close to
fair.
pretty close to pick 'em, honestly, I kinda expected Pavlovich. I kinda expected those odds to be flipped, to be honest, just from by first glance, but very
While we're
interesting.
talking about it, for 295, Yuri is +125 and Pereira is -145.
Yeah, I mean, I also
Another
thought
one where I thought would be flipped, yeah.
Yeah.
like, I get the odds being that close, but yeah, I think both of those I just thought for off first glance, like, obviously, I haven't watched, tape like on those specific matchups, but just by watching those guys, how many times we've watched them in the UFC so far, like I would have thought those odds would be flipped as well, especially Pereira only having one fight at light heavyweight.
Yeah, I do. I think that the card got better with that announcement. It's unfortunate because I think that it was going to be the retirement of maybe both John Jones and Stipe. It just it now begs so many questions as to the futures of John Jones and Stipe. I don't see Stipe fighting one of the new breed guys. I don't see Jones doing it, and the fact that the Pavlovich and Aspinall is for an interim, and Jon Jones isn't vacating yet. It makes me think maybe that's the thing. You would
That's
think
the
Jon
only thing
Jones'
I
first
can
fight
think.
back would be against Aspinall or Spivak or
Yeah,
Pavlovich, sorry. But
yeah.
I mean, then what happens to Stipe? So there's a lot of questions now. There's a lot of questions. And speaking of questions,
Nice.
Admin Oscar, I think you got a couple for us.
Yeah, I have one. I was just thinking about this. So I saw that Sean Strickland said that Hamzat doesn't deserve to fight for the belt. Now, granted, just for clarity's sake, he didn't say like it didn't make sense. Like he gets it, he sells fights and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But he said in terms of what he's done, he doesn't deserve to just kind of cut the line. So my question was, does Dricus Duplessis have a right to be annoyed at this?
Yeah, to be honest, I would say yes. Like I talked about this with Rick down at his house, and I was just like, I literally said, it's pretty crazy that the winner of this Kazmat Kamara fight is getting a title shot. And obviously, it's nothing about those guys' skills. Like Kamara was one of the greatest welterweight champs of all time, dominant fighter, and Kazmat has literally looked so dominant in the UFC so far. But you think about it, uh, was that so that's Kazmat's what second fight at 185? His only like in that and then the first fight was a short notice fight against Kevin Holland. So he's fought at the weight class one time and he's gonna get a title shot. And even if Kamara would have won, like that was would be Kamara's first win against um a middleweight. So yeah, I kind of agree with him, man. Like, and it sucks because like Duplessis missed out on his title shot because of an injury, but, like, that's kinda what I was talking with the Oliveira thing, man, like, the UFC just does what makes sense money-wise, and they kinda just move on from you if even if it happens in a really shitty way, like getting injured, but, yeah, I mean, if I was Duplessis, I'd be pissed, and I don't think I agree with Sean Strickland, and yeah, like you said, like Strickland said he understands why it's happening, and like he's gonna fight Kazmat. He's not saying like he doesn't deserve it. I'm not gonna fight him. Like he's gonna do what the UFC says, and he's gonna take the fight. It just it doesn't make the most sense in my opinion. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Rick?
I think that Dreykus has the right to be annoyed, but in the same sense, like you were saying, it's easy to get passed up on. And it sucks that it happened due to injury, but I mean, if you don't capitalize when it's there, sometimes this is what happens. And I don't think that Dreykus himself is a pusher of fights. I think that the Dreykus versus Israel fight was
Well,
super fun, a
yeah,
lot because of the beef and what have you. But you know what? now you can make that fight, even not for a belt. Maybe you can make it a number
Yeah.
one contender fight. But I mean, we heard Israel say that he wanted to take a little bit of time off, which he has deserved. He deserves that. He was such an active champion. He deserves a little bit of time off. It's just I I I don't think that Dricus was all that deserving of it. I mean, he beat Rob Whitaker, which was a great win, but
Yeah. Before that, I agree. I agree.
it was
But
kind of a
he
weird situational like
the one thing
Dricus.
I will say, he was on a pretty solid win streak. I don't know how many it was in a row. I think it was like 4 or 5, maybe 4, but, like, yeah, it's like the guys he beat before Whitaker, it was a Darren Till who was out of the UFC after that fight, it was a couple other guys that really never were that close to a title, but then he comes in and fights Robert Whitaker, who's literally has been the number 1 contender at that division for how long, and he made it look easy. So it is tough. It's definitely a tough situation, and it's interesting which way they're gonna go. But it's like, who would you match Dricus up with since Izzy's gonna be on the shelf for so long? Like Dricus was very active, before his injury and stuff. So if Izzy's on the shelf for a while, like who does he just sit on the shelf and wait for that Izzy fight? Does he, like it's like who were you gonna match him up with? Maybe like a Whitaker rematch, which I mean I would still love to see it, but he won that fight very dominantly. So it's definitely interesting to see like where they go with that division.
Yeah, and like you were saying, like some of Dricus's wins before Whitaker, I mean, he almost got finished by Blonde Brunson.
Yes.
I mean, it's I like Dricus,
That
and
is a myth. That is a mythical fighter. So.
definitely a mythical fighter, Blonde Brunson. Don't get me wrong. It's just I I I don't know. I would love to see Dricus and Izzy. It depends how long Izzy would like to stay on the shelf for. I mean, you got the guys like, I don't know, Jack Hermanson, but, like, that's just such a step
Yeah,
down in competition. It's
that's
such a
I
high
agree.
high risk, low reward for Dricus. But
Mhm.
the thing is, like we were saying, Hamzat is the guy that sells fights, and I think he sells
For
fights
sure.
better than champion Sean Strickland himself. And I think that Sean Strickland would very obviously prefer to fight Dricus for plus. I think it's an easier fight for him. Maybe if Kamaru wants to stay up in 185, he can fight Dricus. I don't know. I just like, I think, Dricus missed his opportunity. I think it's as simple as that. I
Yeah.
do, and it sucks. I'm sure he did get injured, and I'm sure a lot of these guys get injured. It's just super unfortunate for him. I mean, the fight to make was Dricus versus Izzy for the belt. That was gonna be a fun fight. It was gonna be good lead up. It was gonna be good banter between the 2. It's just what did Dricus and Sean Strickland have? I mean, Sean Strickland can market a fight because he'll just, go on to whatever foreign policy subject that he wants to talk about during the
Yeah.
presser, and he'll just leave Dricus there. He'll probably
Well,
trash talk all of South Africa, but,
yeah, for sure, and he became a superstar with that win over Izzy, like, there's no doubt. He was gaining traction before that, and then that win kinda catapulted him to superstardom, and then you have Kazmat, who has over 4 million followers on Instagram, who there's just no denying his popularity and his skills. Like he is a very good fighter. It is a little weird to me getting a title shot like that, but like the UFC's a business. It's not just a sport. Like MMA is a sport, the UFC isn't. The UFC's
yeah.
a business. So
It's not fair, but, life isn't fair, so,
very true.
well, that's just the truth. That was a great question, and, I think that one other thing that we definitely need to talk about here is this weekend's fight, and we know there's no UFC this weekend, but there is some boxing, if you wanna call it that. Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury. Uh, what are our thoughts here? I mean, I have my thoughts. I'll save them for after your thoughts. Let's hear them. What do you think?
So I mean, I don't know, man. Like I just hate watching these MMA fighters go into boxing and not do well. Like it's similar to Connor and Floyd to an extent, but if you think about it, like Floyd was retired for how long before he fought Connor, and he kind of came out of retirement, and Connor had at least, like obviously they made a certain weight class, but like Connor was the bigger man in that fight for sure. And like I will say he did well in that fight. Like he made MMA fighters look good, like good going into boxing. Like that was a respectable performance against Floyd for sure. Dude, Tyson Fury is so good, and what he does to heavyweights that are actually boxers, like It's tough, and he doesn't really have he won't really have a size advantage. Like, yeah, or like, yeah, Francis won't have a size advantage. Like, yeah, Francis looks jacked and all this stuff, but like Tyson Fury is a fucking big dude, and he hits hard, and he's elusive, and he is a phenomenal boxer. It's just, I don't see it ending very well for Francis, even though I want him to do well. I want him to do well since I've been rooting for him since he left the UFC. I think he made a solid move. Like, he joined the PFL even though he hasn't fought there, and he got guaranteed money. Like, he got a lot of his demands or a lot of his requests taken care of, like, that he wanted from the UFC. So, and that's the main thing he wanted to do. He wanted to go to a promotion where he wasn't tied down to the UFC and their contracts, and he has the option to explore boxing and take these big fights with big name people like Tyson Fury. I think the odds are like last time I saw it was like Francis Ngannou was like plus 850, and I think he could even be like plus like 1200. Like, and I don't know if those moved at all or anything. Like, I don't even know if where you really can even bet on. Like, I don't know if it's on like most sports books, but like I don't think it's on FanDuel. It might be. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's gonna end well for him. Tyson Fury is a phenomenal boxer, and like, yeah, he has that power, but that's kind of like was the story with Connor and Floyd. Like, oh, if he lands that one shot, like it's easier said than done, especially when you're going from 4-ounce gloves to 10-ounce gloves. Like, it's a completely different ball game, and it's just the way you throw strikes, the way it just there's so much different nuances with boxing that he hasn't experienced anyone like Tyson Fury. Like, I'm sure he's sparred pro boxers in the gym and has done well with them, but it's completely different in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
Uh, I just think he never really had the footwork in MMA, it was always the
Yeah,
power, so
I
he's
agree.
definitely not gonna have the footwork in boxing, and like we were saying earlier when we were talking about Jon Jones and Stipe just in general, the one thing that Francis got a lot better as his martial arts career progressed was the wrestling and the
Yep.
takedown, so we know that that's what he was working on a lot leading up to the
Mhm.
second Stipe fight,
For sure.
so it's like he's dropping that completely to go full forward with boxing, which we know he has the power. We know how powerful he is. It's just, man, it's just Fury is so smooth. He's gonna move around him, and he's gonna be so hard to hit. Francis, he punches straight. He does.
Yeah.
It's like he needs him right in front of him, and he needs to wig him with one real big hook for something to really happen. And Fury's never gonna let that happen. We
Yeah,
know.
he rushes forward too, like you a lot. Yeah, like you said with his footwork, man. Like, even in some of his MMA fights, like what was it, the Rosenstruck fight where he literally just bum rushed him, missed him 7 times, and then hits him with a shot. Like, if Rosenstruck just circles out, steps off the center line, and lands a shot of his own, like, that fight could have went completely different. Yes, it's easier said than done, but when you're going up against someone who has that great footwork, that great of footwork, and just has been boxing for how long? Like, it's so tough. It is so
Yeah, Jair Rosenstruck is no Tyson Fury. Let's
yeah,
just say, and like you said, Rosenstruck could have very easily stepped one of those punches to the side, and
yeah.
that fight could have gone very
He
differently.
literally went straight backwards.
I'm
And I
rushed.
get it. Like, if I had Francis Ngannou doing that same thing to me, it's easier said than done moving off the center line. Like, that's a scary motherfucker winging punches at you, and like, but I mean, Tyson Fury's been there, man. He's done everything you can in the sport. Like,
Yeah, and I'm rooting for Francis. I love Francis. I hope all goes well for Francis. It's just this is such a money wise, it's a great opportunity for him, but fighting wise, I feel like we're gonna get to round 2 or 3, and we're just gonna get bored of it. It's not gonna look like, but it's gonna be reminiscent of Stipe and Francis' first fight, where it's like, man, this guy never really stood a chance, did he? And
mhm.
it's sad, but he's making a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. I just hope he has a respectable performance. If he like even can go, I don't know how many rounds they set it for. I don't because it's technically an exhibition, right? Or do they make it? I don't know what it is, but so I don't know if it's 10 rounds or 12 rounds. But I mean, if he goes 8 rounds with Tyson Fury and looks good, like even like kind of like Connor did with Floyd Mayweather. Like, Connor landed some good shots, but like as the fight progressed, you could tell how much better of a boxer Floyd was than Connor. And like it just kind of seems like the same story. Like, oh, if he lands that one shot, it's like it's different, man, with those the 4 ounce to 10 ounce gloves. Like it's completely different getting hit by that. If like anyone's ever sparred with the small gloves, MMA gloves, man, every shot sucks. Like you don't want to get hit at all. Like it's completely different.
No padding.
Yeah.
No padding. But I'm pretty surprised that Dana is letting this fight go without any UFC event. I mean, Dana is as petty as they get. We all know that.
Yeah.
So it's shocking that he's letting Fury and Ngannou have their own night. I mean, I would have almost guaranteed that there was something to compete and take away some of the gate from Francis because I mean, we all know the ongoing battles between Francis and the UFC and how
Yeah.
he was so adamant about fighter pay. I'm surprised Dana's letting him have his big night.
Well, I was like wondering, it was just like what I do with like when we research the fights, like I watch the fight Saturday, I kind of chill Sunday, watch football, and then Monday I look at the next card, and I was like, what the fuck? There's no UFC on this weekend. Like I literally like I don't know why they're taking. I guess maybe it is because they don't want to compete with that fight in terms of like putting on an event, and then most people are gonna watch the Fury Ngannou fight because like Ngannou does have a big following as well, and then obviously Tyson Fury has a huge following. So I don't know why there's not UFC on this weekend, and yeah, that's a good point. Like maybe he really just doesn't even want to compete with it, knowing like could even make the UFC look bad in that. Because like, we weren't gonna get a title. Like there was no title fight, so if anything, it was gonna be a UFC fight night. So most eyes are gonna be on that fight, the Ngannou Fury fight, anyways. So I think Dana just kind of made a smart business move, saying not really even gonna try to compete with that. If anything, it's just gonna make my company look bad. Yeah.
So, I actually have a theory is which it kind of ties into the next thing you guys are talking about a little bit, but there's no, the pay-per-view is through ESPN and you do it through ESPN Plus, which of
Uh,
course is where all
Partner
the
with
UFC is now.
yeah.
So wondering if maybe it was something with that they were like competing within each other. So
That
something
makes
like that, it
sense.
could be the case.
That makes a complete sense. I did not know that was the pay-per-view, like, was through, like, ESPN Plus and all that, so that yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, and then with the couple of minutes we have left here, I wanted to throw out a couple last thoughts on Paramount announcing that Showtime Sports is going to be terminated end of 2023. For those of you that don't know, Showtime Sports had PBC Boxing and Bellator. It's been rumored that Bellator is getting bought out by PFL, although it has not been made official yet. I had just been reading up on that. It has not been made
Okay.
official that PFL is buying out Bellator, but I mean, obviously, Scott Coker has been shopping Bellator for how long now? It's gonna get bought out by somebody. They already have released Big Dylan Dennis, who has came out and said it's UFC or retirement for him. So enjoy retirement, Dylan.
Wait, real quick before we talk, do you think, I just wanna ask you, do you think Dylan's gonna get signed by the UFC?
Never,
Okay.
never.
I
I just don't think that Dana. I don't think Dana likes him, and balls in Dana's court. And
yeah,
I think I was saying it to you. I think I had said that Dylan Dennis would probably bring back some money. But
yeah,
is it worth it? Is it worth the headache? Because if he pulls out once and
yeah.
he's healthy and pulling out, Dana is going to immediately cut him, and I don't think it's worth Dana's time.
Okay, I agree, like, I don't think he should, but I do think he's gonna get signed, and
It'd be interesting.
the only reason I say that is he has 4 million followers on Instagram. That's literally more than any welterweight in the world. Like only person that has more is that you could consider a welterweight is Khamzat Chimaev, who's moved up to middleweight now. So he has more followers than Leon Edwards, Coley Covington, all these other welterweights. And yeah, like I said, the UFC is a business, and man, like Connor's their golden boy, and they are very good friends. And I just think like they will sign him. And like I know Ariel even talked about this a little bit on his show. I could see them going even the all right, like you want to get signed here, like we're gonna make you come on the contender series or the Ultimate Fighter route. Like I could see that because what it does is it gives more exposure to those shows that don't have the most exposure, especially like the Ultimate Fighter that's been around so long that's kind of lost mystique about it, like a lot of like I feel like the Ultimate Fighter is not as big as it used to be. So I could see the UFC pulling that card, saying, "You want to be in the UFC? We will offer you a Contender Series fight, or come on the Ultimate Fighter and prove that you deserve." But yeah, go on again about Showtime. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Well,
Uh,
I think that PFL potentially buying out Bellator almost, but I mean, Danis did get released off the roster, but I think the PFL should be Danis's home. I mean, I think that
yeah, it sounds like a
he's
good home for him.
it just sounds like it kind of seems like he's entering the realm of influence fighter. Fight one of the Paul brothers in martial arts. Jake Paul
Yeah,
is signed to PFL.
definitely.
That fight is right there waiting for you. That would do a lot of money, as much as I hate to say it.
No, yeah. I think
I
he did talk about that a little bit too. Like he's like, I would go to the PFL, but like I'd have to fight Jake Paul. It's like, dude, can you really be making those demands after your last performance? But yeah,
I just think that that's his golden opportunity. I mean, like you said, he probably could make it in the UFC. He could probably beat a couple of these guys. I don't know if Dana's going to want to deal with it. He would bring good exposure to, like you said, that was a good point through Ultimate Fighter or through the Contender Series.
yeah,
I think it's just I don't know. But one person on Bellator's roster that I do know has mutual interest, the UFC and himself, is MVP Michael Venom Page. And one thing I find hilarious is Dana. Oh, this kid's got talent. This kid is 37. So let's stop calling him a kid. I do
yeah.
think that that's good.
I didn't realize he was that old.
I know
We
he's
forced the
old.
kid card. This
This
kid's
kid,
interested in the UFC,
he's a man.
and we're interested in him. It's like, yeah, I mean, he's 37 years old, but
Yeah,
he would be a fun fighter on the roster.
he
Like
would.
I don't know how good he would do in certain matchups, but like obviously there's fights he can win in the UFC, and maybe it's not even in the top 15 or top 10, like maybe not, but like he's gonna sell fights, and they're gonna do the thing where they match him up very specifically, kind of like what they've done with Paddy Pimblett, where he's
England cards.
such a big name. Yep, he's an England guy. Like they'll give him handpicked matchups that are very good for his stylistic matchups for him, and they'll kind of slow roll him, until they give him those bigger fights. So even with Patty fighting Tony now, who's a huge name, but he's on a 4 fight skid or whatever he's on, like they are just that's what the UFC does, man. They don't want to lose that stardom that these guys have. I don't love it, but it is what it is. But I would like to see him in the UFC. Like there are fights that will be very exciting with him.
Yeah, man, it's gonna get real interesting with that. With Bellator potentially getting bought out, that roster is gonna get shaken up, and there's a lot of big name fighters. There's a lot of big names that could be Pride. That's why I just I don't think that I don't think PFL buying them out completely and taking over the roster completely would be the best move just for level of competition. But like I said, it's going to get interesting here in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned to that. Make sure to tune into our episode next week. We have, what is it, Derek Lewis versus Jailton Almeida next week. So we'll be going into that card. We'll obviously recap what happens in Francis and Tyson. Uh, yeah, so make sure to tune in next week. We'll give you guys our picks, and we'll be sure to talk about this weekend of very boring martial arts and boxing.
Yeah, I was just gonna end with even with the full fade this week, we are still up right around 1.8 units in the UFC. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a nice bounce back for us, and hopefully we'll get some of that money back we lost this weekend. But good stuff, brother. I'll see you next one.
Yep, we'll see everybody next week.